Good afternoon, good morning, I guess, depending on where it is you are joining us from. It is great to have you here for yet another episode of the EQ Lunch and Learn. As we round off this month that contains the International Women's Day, we thought it would be great to have a conversation about accelerating equity, something we do every March for our Lunch and Learn episode. Equity is more than just a buzzword. It's a fundamental principle that ensures fairness, opportunity, and inclusion for all. Whilst progress has been made, we know the research shows that systemic barriers and disparities still exist across workplaces, communities, and industries. And today, we're going to have a conversation to explore how we can move beyond awareness into action. And I'll be seeking the perspectives of my esteemed panelists. We're going to talk about how we can break down some of the obstacles that exist and drive meaningful change. As always, I have a fabulous team that is with me, a panel that I know is going to bring some amazing insights to our conversation. I always say you provide your lunch, and I can guarantee you we will provide the learning. So let me bring up the team I have with me. I have three amazing individuals who are going to share in this conversation. Let me start with Susan. Susan is no stranger to this platform. She has been with us a number of times, and we're excited to have you here again. Susan Chege is a passionate and distinguished people leader with over 18 years of multifaceted experience in HR leadership and consulting combined. Her expertise spans small, medium, and large enterprises, where she has successfully partnered with organizations to drive people and change initiatives that align talent and business strategy. Susan is someone that I really enjoy engaging with, and I'm really excited that she is a member of the PTS family. Susan, your bio is long, so allow me to just say that for those who'd like to connect with you further, they can find you on LinkedIn. We've shared your LinkedIn link. Susan, welcome to the session.
Hi, Mucha, and hi, everyone. It's always such a pleasure to be on this Lunch and Learn, and I'm looking forward to a lot of learning myself.
Fantastic. I know we always learn from each other, don't we? So it's great to have you here. All right. So another person who is become a member of the wider PTS family and one of the consultants that we work with, and someone I'm really excited to have here on this EQ Lunch and Learn is Kelvin. Kelvin, it's great to have you here. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we are going to have together. As the CEO of Elevated Growth, my apologies, he is committed to driving growth, operational excellence, and transformational leadership. With a strong background in coaching and mentorship, Kelvin empowers individuals and organizations to achieve their full potential through strategic leadership and efficiency-driven solutions. Sometimes when these things are written, they are buzzwords, but I can assure you that in the case of this particular individual, it's not just buzzwords, it's for real. Very passionate about fintech development. He advocates for innovation, digital transformation, and financial inclusion, leveraging technology to create equitable opportunities and sustainable growth. And if you want to learn more, you can connect with him on LinkedIn. Thank you very much for being here today. Just say hi to us as we kick off.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Mucha. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward for the conversation.
Fantastic. And then last but not least, we have with us Milan Kabata. Milan, it is so good to have you here. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation. Milan is a passionate and self-driven individual, currently the marketing director at Dairyland, with expertise spanning from telco, retail, LPG, and FMCG. Over the past 9 years, she has crafted and led high-impact marketing strategies, combining data-driven insights with a deep commitment to authentic brand engagement. And as always, I always tell you guys that I bring you good people. There is so much more I could say about her, but allow me to say you can connect with her on LinkedIn and find out more. Milan, it's great to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to join this panel. A beautiful panel it is, and I'm excited to hear what the rest have to share.
Fantastic. So, these are the individuals who are going to help us break down the conversation we are having today. The EQ Lunch and Learn series is really designed to help you to develop greater emotional intelligence. And you may look at the title and think, what does this title have to do with EQ? At PTS Africa, we believe that emotional intelligence is not just another skill that you need to add to your plate. It is the plate upon which everything else lies. And so for us, all of the conversations we have are rooted in EQ because each of these concepts and ideas is. And this will become more apparent as we carry on with the conversation. So, to my panelists, I like to open the discussion with a question that is common to all of you. So, we're talking about, accelerating equity, and it's an EQ Lunch and Learn. So, how do you define emotional intelligence in this context, in the context of leadership and gender equality? And how can, emotional intelligence support women to navigate common biases in leadership? Susan, can I start with you as we kick off the conversation?
Sure. Thanks, Mucha. And yeah, I think a lot of people would be like, okay, equity, EQ. Okay, we see the two letters that are the same, but what else? So I think I'll take it a step back and kind of share my thoughts on equity. Yeah. So, equity in the workplace is around, creating a culture of fairness, removing biases, having impartiality and justice throughout the workplace, right? One of the things that we forget is that, or the differentiator between equity and equality is that equity has an element of understanding that different people have different needs. So having a blanket policy that says we treat everyone the same is equality, but not necessarily equity. And that is where EQ comes in, because EQ calls upon leaders and organizations to take it a step further to what I love advocating for is really understanding your employees and what their unique needs are. So when we have an organization that takes into consideration EQ, there's a lot of delving into social awareness, understanding the people around you, understanding your stakeholders, understanding your employees, and tailor making practices and policies around that. So it's in everything from, communication styles, in what we send out to our employees, what we send out to our markets, the practices that we do, how yes, it's fair, and we give these certain timelines, and everyone works 8 to 5, and it's for everyone. But how is that suited to the specific individuals that you have in your organization? So I think that difference between equity and equality is the EQ in it, and applying that awareness of ourselves as leaders, applying our awareness of individuals in terms of being in a situation to understand them, which requires the empathy in EQ, understanding how to relate and build those relationships. That's the difference between an organization, or that's the winning, the one that bridges over between equality and equity.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that, you make a really great point around the need to understand the people that you are leading. Milan, let me come to you next. And then I'll close, excuse me, with the one gentleman in the room on the same question. What are your thoughts around, where emotional intelligence comes in, or what is emotional intelligence in the context of leadership and gender equality?
I think I agree with her completely, but I think I'll take it from a different angle. So I think for me, emotional intelligence is self-regulation, a good hybrid between self-regulation and just somebody having a deep dive into conversations with or the relationships you have around the workplace, especially as a leader. When it comes to the team members that you're leading, for example, there has to be a deep dive into the nuances that makes them them, so that you're able to lead with a very capable capacity, not just from a empathy point, but a connection point. So I feel like there is no way you're going to connect with your team members or lead them if you don't have, one, a connection with them, two, a basis of understanding of what makes them them. So then again, if you have that, it's very easy to apply emotional intelligence in your leadership role. Sorry. Yeah, that's what I think.
Wow, I like that. And I really love the thread I'm seeing. And I hope that for my audience, you're seeing that thread too, that how emotional intelligence is so critical. Kelvin, your thoughts on this same question?
I think Susan and Milan has really said it all. For me, EQ in leadership. EQ for me in leadership is that balance between self-awareness, resilience, and influence. That ability to be able to create a fair, effective workplace for you people. And that comes with what Milan and Susan are saying. You have to really understand the team members that you have, that being able to understand how does it work for everybody, and creating that balance between equality and equity in the workplace. And yeah, for me, when it comes to EQ and leadership, I see it as that balance between self-awareness, influence, and resilience. Being able to understand yourself and how do you use your position in leadership to be able to create a fair and effective workplace. Yeah.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much. And I think when influence is tempered with empathy, then it becomes a lot more impactful, right? Because it's something that is really utilized in a way. And speaking to your point, Milan, it's
Yeah.
also born out of this connection that you're having.
Exactly.
I always say that being a leader is a lot of work because it really requires you to connect with the people that you are leading. As opposed to seeing leadership as an opportunity to kind of boss people around. So thank you very much for all those insights. If you've just joined us, we're talking about accelerating equity. And I'd mentioned the fact that for us, emotional intelligence is involved in everything. And so we're unpacking how it is that we see emotional intelligence impacts our ability to accelerate equity. And I think this is both from the perspective of those who are in a space where they are pushing, those boundaries, and as women in leadership, and trying to be able to truly lead effectively. And then also from the allies who are, working in the space to try and cultivate a more equitable environment for all. So thank you very much to my panel. Don't forget to say hi if you're with us. I can see there's a few people who are online. I need you to say hi so I can say hi back to you. Just say hello and tell us where you are joining us from. We love guests. We love our guests, and we really want to give you a shout out. So please do say hello so that we can shout out back, whether you're joined on YouTube, whether you're here with us on LinkedIn. Milan, I want to come back to you. As a leader of an organization with a big and vibrant team, some argue that empathy in leadership can slow down decision making. How do you integrate empathy while ensuring efficiency? I speak to leaders who tell me, there's no time to be empathic. We need to move. So what is your thoughts on that?
I think number one, I think empathy at times is misunderstood. I think there's a blur line between empathy and sympathy, especially for women in leadership. And I kind of feel like a lot of people will sort of poke you as a woman boss because they know you're sympathetic, right? So they go for your sympathetic side, not your empathy side, because empathy is offering and carrying grace for the other person with an understanding of what they are going through, but not necessarily immersing and drowning yourself in their personal state and dragging the whole team along. So I kind of feel that you have to have boundaries with your team, right? Again, going back to the connection, once you have a connection with your team, there's a symbioticness that comes with that connection, because they will not want to take advantage of you showing grace when you're dealing with them on personal issues, whether it's a mom on maternity or whatever situation that is. I feel like empathy has to be very guided and very fenced around very strong boundaries and clear communication, so that guys are not taking you for granted or taking you for a ride because you are the good boss. But then balance is important. But without boundaries, then empathy cannot yield any efficiency at all.
Wow. If we were in church, I would say amen.
Amen.
Milan, oh my goodness. You have just said it. You have said
Yeah.
it so well. I really
Yeah.
love the point you made about how empathy comes with boundaries. So if it doesn't have boundaries, it's not empathy, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
really, we've given empathy a very bad name in the guise of empathy being this thing where, and I like the terminology you use, where you're drowning in the personal issues of your team. And that's not what
Exactly.
empathy is, right? That's not what empathy is. And so empathy has really gotten this bad rap. Susan, I saw you nodding along as Milan was.
Yes, because she really hit the nail on the head. And I was just, as you asked the question, and I was reflecting on what my response would be, I was like, yes, this is it. It's misunderstood. And empathy is really undervalued, because empathy is not only being able to put yourself in that person's shoes to extend grace, but empathy is a powerful tool that allows us to understand that person and their situation and then find a way to will them towards whatever direction you need to will them to, right? Like if you think of a con man, and this is a really bad example, but if you think of a con man, that guy takes time to understand, or that woman takes time to understand what is important to you, and then tailors the communication or the opportunity to that which is important to you. And I think that's the part that we need to borrow from as leaders and as people with a purpose in the workplace or whatever it is that if you apply empathy, then you're able to then communicate in a way that appeals to your audience and then gets you moving towards a direction that you collectively see a mutual benefit.
Wow. I think that's so true. I love
Yeah.
that. I love what you've
I
both
also want
said.
to say, preach,
Yes,
Suzanne,
Milan.
preach, preach, Suzanne.
I know, right? I know.
Yep.
I really like
Yeah.
I like what you said, Susan, around the piece of empathy that we often miss is that, and not in a manipulative way, but as we extend empathy, the idea is to support the individual into the action that is required. And that goes back to what Milan said about empathy with boundaries, right? And so when I talk to leaders about empathy, and the feedback I get is, oh no, if we're empathic, people will kind of take you for a ride, as Milan said. I always tell them that's not empathy, right? What you're doing when people take you for a ride is not empathy, right? Because empathy holds people accountable. Empathy has boundaries that are very clear. And I think that's really important. So we can exercise empathy within our organizations. One of the things you talked about, Kelvin, is the idea of influence. And I like that. So I want to come back to that. And I want to ask you, how can top leadership influence organizational change to accelerate gender equality or gender equity, let's say? Gender equity. How can top leadership, use that influence?
Simply put, Mucha, top leadership can accelerate gender equality by simply working with them. If you if you look at most of our organizations and even in the political field, we are not devoid of, policies and papers that talk about gender equity or equality and all these things, but simply nobody is willing to work at all. And so for me, from where I sit, when you're in the top leadership, all you need to do is just walk the talk. Just practice and execute whatever you have put as a policy. And one of the things that we're talking about here when you're talking about gender equality, one of the things we cannot fail to mention is bias. Some of the biases that come with gender equality, especially now that we're in the month where we're closing off, um, uh, uh, what is it? I forget the name.
International
I
Women's
want to use
Day.
International Women's Day. I
Yes,
wanted the
yes.
actual tagline. Yes, one of the people
Yeah.
that unfortunately face the biggest gender bias is the women, and so I think one of the ways the top leadership can basically help implement this is one, call out bias in real time. For me, I say like once something happens, call out a bias. And one person interestingly said that sometimes we reward bad behavior by not speaking about it. It's one way of rewarding bad behavior. And so sometimes from where I sit, sometimes when I look at CEOs and a CEO that ignores gender-based exclusion, for me, it's just being complicit. So for me, just call out bias in real time, and you're going to help accelerate gender equality or equity in your organization. But then, having said that, I think it's also important for us to develop succession plans with gender balance in mind. I think that's one thing that really we miss a lot especially in the corporate world and the political world. We develop succession plans with gender balance already in mind. So sometimes we try to rectify the mistake after it happens, but I think it's important that as we build the plans right from the beginning, we start off right. And no one should be asking, for example, there's this thing that I keep hearing, where are our women leaders? For me, I feel like we started wrong right from the beginning. We had gender balance in mind as we were developing succession plans, because really, if you're not even recruiting right from the beginning as a leader, then when you're promoting, who are you promoting really? If your organization is 100% male dominated or 100% female dominated, even at the point of promoting, really there's no gender balance there, because you are actually promoting the people that you recruited. So if we are able to have the succession plan with gender balance in mind, then you realize it's going to become easy to even influence gender and accelerate gender equality when it comes to, even in that professional career. And lastly, what I would like to say is something I've always wanted. Let's normalize seeing women in leadership. Now that we're in that in the International Women's Day, let's just normalize female leadership. And we can always do that by consistently giving women the platform and the influence that they deserve, basically, because they deserve those particular platforms. And let's make it normal. I mean, I was just thinking, when I was thinking about this conversation, and I was just thinking about women in leadership, I was just thinking, currently we are headed as a society, we are headed into a place where it's going to be the norm, but currently it is not the norm. And it's up to us people in leadership that we are going to create that normalcy where we have women in leadership. I was just thinking, which if, for example, today I was appointed as a leader in some certain parastatal, the headline in the news would say, John has resigned, Kevin has been appointed as the lead. But if Mucha was to be appointed the leader of the same parastatal, the headline would say Kevin has resigned and X parastatal has appointed a woman leader, meaning it's not yet a normal occurrence. Your name would not appear. Your name would appear on the 15th paragraph of that news headline. So the fact, when we normalize the women's leadership, then we play a very critical role in accelerating gender equity in our society. So for me, again, I sum it up is just walk the talk. We have a lot of policies. We don't need to create any more of them. Let's just implement these policies.
Yeah, I love that. I really like your point, because indeed, in many organizations, the issue is not the policy. The policy is there, right? The issue is that we're not walking the talk. And I like what you said about the intentionality of succession planning with the view to ensuring gender equity. So that means that there's an intentionality that is required as we look at the people we have within the organization, and then also asking ourselves, who are we bringing in to the organization, and how are we preparing them so that they can rise up to those levels of leadership. And it's so true how the headline I really agree with that, because it's like it's not normal. Susan, let me come to you. What are some key strategies organizations can implement? I know that we've said in most organizations the strategy is there, but let's just talk a little bit about those strategies and initiatives. So what are some key strategies organizations can implement to ensure gender inclusive leadership pipelines? Because Kevin talked about, succession.
Yeah, I really love everything. Kelvin, wow. Wow. Yeah, and I think I'll just spin off what Kelvin said, that it's not because there's a void in policy, or there's no DEI statement. A lot of organizations have done this, and it's ticking off on their ESG scoreboard, but then it's a policy that sits somewhere on some database. And we have once in a while, and during IWD month, it's pulled out and read about, and we have a few activations. But what Kelvin said is really it. It's about walking the talk, making it. When we started, I said that equity in an organization is a part of culture. And culture is not something you do once in a year. It's actually something you do it defines how you do everything that you do. So right from the onset, as Kelvin mentioned, start from your recruitment process. Now, something I learned a couple years ago is that even our job descriptions or job vacancies have biases in them. And you can actually use AI to identify what biases. There's certain words that appeal to certain genders and certain words that deter certain genders in the way that we phrase, even as early as our vacancy announcement. So there's some things that a man will read in a vacancy announcement and say, this is not for me, whether consciously or subconsciously. So let's start right from the moment that we have an opportunity. So that's at your recruitment stage. Then there's at your onboarding. How are you managing bringing on your people? And how is their experience in that? And what data are we gathering about whether this is suited for different genders or different diversities, even outside of gender? Then there's something very critical that Kelvin was talking about, is the succession planning. And it's not only succession planning, but learning and development. So there's certain competencies that tend to be gender related. So I'll give us a short, example. Men and women are different in terms of how they project their confidence. So even in that vacancy announcement example, a man can go for a job where he has 20% of he ticks 20% of the requirements, and 80% of them he doesn't have. A woman will have 80% of those requirements and only be lacking 20%. But the man will walk into that room with full confidence and convince that panel that he can do it. And a woman won't even apply. So even in your learning and development, there's certain programs that you need to consider that might be accelerating the gender equity. So whether it's presentation skills, whether it's negotiation skills, whether to tailor make your learning and development journeys to accelerate that equity in the organization. And then when you're doing that and you're doing your practices, seek feedback. The people who will tell you if you're doing it right are your employees. So seek feedback, and they will tell you what their experience is, both as women, as men, and other diversities. They'll let you know how the employee journey is in your organization and what you need to change. It could be anything from flexible working arrangements. So everybody works 8 hours, yes, but there could be certain hours that the single dad would want to come in earlier and leave earlier so that he's able to pick up his children. Or there could be hours that you need to give 1 hour breaks for a nursing mother to express. There are things that you need to be constantly aware of. And it goes back to what Milan was talking about, is really get to know your individuals in your workforce and then work on strategies. So make it a part of your culture in every stage of the employee journey to consider equity. Oh, one last one, Mucha.
Yes.
Monitor. So I talked about monitoring and evaluating how well you're doing in this equity culture. But there's some matrices that we need to look at. Like, we have the data as HR people on who's being promoted. Look at that data and reflect on whether that is actually reflecting an equity culture. Look at who's leaving. So I was in an organization whereby the gender balance was good all along. Then as you get higher up in leadership, it really dips. And women would leave at a certain level of seniority. And that gave an indication that there's something that is not, the platform is not working across different diversities. And that gave an indication that the strategy needed to be changed around to suit and to continue being a culture of equity. So there are the the ones that come from feedback, and then there's measures that you can take to look at, your promotion, your attrition, your grievances, the disciplinary processes. You have this data as HR people. Look at it and analyze it to then inform how equitable a culture that you have.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that point is really important, the idea of measurement, right? So, look at the data. What are the numbers saying when you look at the team that you have and how the team is thriving? It's great to have you with us. Shout out to Daisy Mayo. Daisy, it's nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And Eunice Ongele, it's great to have you here as well. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are online, I can see we have a number. Please say hi so we can say hi back. It's great to have you with us. We're having a conversation about accelerating equity. And as always, at PTS, we believe everything should be viewed with the lens of emotional intelligence. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're unpacking what we can do as individuals and what can be done in organizations as we, come to the end of the month where we celebrate International Women's Day. So, Susan and Milan, I'd love you to answer this next question. Yes,
Sorry.
Susan. No apologies. For the benefit of those who are watching, I always tell our panelists that this is a conversation amongst friends. So, when friends are talking, you jump in and you add. So you're welcome, Susan. Go ahead.
As you're, you were recapping it, and I was reflecting, and I thought, all that is good. We have policies, we have practices, but one of the things that is a barrier to equity in the workplace is, and Kelvin alluded to it, is there's bias. And a lot of it is unconscious bias. So I think organizations would be a step further if they could do some sensitization around unconscious bias. Yeah, I think people being able to then reflect and go back to their EQ on self-awareness and recognize the biases they have gives them an opportunity to eliminate those biases that they didn't even know they had.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that addition. So I want to ask a question to both of you ladies, and this really is thinking about the kind of environments that we find ourselves working in. So how can women leaders leverage emotional intelligence to navigate workplace challenges such as this bias that we're talking about, right? So you find yourself working in a space where there's that microaggression. There is that maybe bias that may be possibly even overt, right? You're seeing that you're missing out on opportunities. How do you navigate that with emotional intelligence? How do you deal with, imposter syndrome? How do you navigate that work-life balance? We know research shows that unpaid work, unpaid care, what we do in terms of nurturing our families is something that really can be a really big challenge, right? For someone, if you're doing the drop off and the pickup, if you're the one who's, going for sports and stuff like that, it impacts your ability to show up at work. So how can emotional intelligence help us? How can we use EQ to kind of leverage some of those challenges that occur as women? Not to say men don't face all of these challenges. I know that there's a lot more men who are heavily invested in family and definitely things like, raising children and the like. But I'm talking specifically for women in leadership. How can EQ help? Susan, let me start with you since you're the last one speaking, then Milan will come to you after that.
Thanks, Mucha. I think there are a lot of challenges for women leaders, as you say, and that's a very heavy question because it has work-life balance, imposter syndrome, and biases. And one of the things that has been coming across in a lot of conversations is self-care. I think, and it's starting with everything from how we speak to ourselves, how we see ourselves, and then how we motivate or demotivate ourselves. So starting with how we see ourselves, I think a lot of times women underplay their achievements and listen a lot to whatever microaggression might be coming, or attribute missing an opportunity to their own performance. And I think it would be a practical thing to do is to take time to reflect on your own and achieve your and celebrate your own achievements. So there's some people who say, you can use a winning journal. So write down your wins for the day or for the week or for the month. And that kind of changes the voices that you're listening to and gives you the kind of confidence that you need to keep going on. Also, get feedback from others. And this is relating to imposter syndrome. Remember my example about, a woman will have 80% of what it takes and talk herself out of it. So get feedback. And a lot of the times you're surprised with the feedback that you get, that you're great at this, you're great at this, you're great at that. And that builds up your self-confidence and starts to reduce the imposter syndrome that is often whispering in your voice, you don't deserve to be here. And this kind of touches on what Kelvin mentioned earlier, that because we've not normalized leadership, a lot of times we're finding that women are being given this narrative that you only got this because we needed a quota of women leaders. And that really tears somebody down. So go back and do your win journal, get feedback that helps you to remember that you have earned your position. And then this thing of perfectionism, we have to stop. Progress over perfection, women leaders, because other leaders in the world who are successfully moving along, they're moving along because progress trumps perfection. We tend to get paralyzed trying to get it absolutely perfect before we give it a try. And that's one of the things that we need to, break out of. And then earlier we talked a little bit about empathy, and I want to turn it around and talk about self-empathy. So as much as you extend to others, feel free to extend yourself the same amount of grace. And I think we rarely do that. And it's tearing us, this work-life balance. That's what happens. You need to be the greatest mom. You need to be the greatest wife. You need to be the greatest daughter, the greatest granddaughter. You need to be the greatest professional. And that pulling you in all these different angles really messes up your work-life balance and puts you in a state where you then start not being able to perform in any of those areas. So manage yourself by first being aware of yourself, getting the feedback that you need to remind yourself that you earned your position, celebrate your wins, take care of yourself, take the necessary breaks. You can only pour from a full cup. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And I think with those small techniques, and especially the biggest one being the empathy to self, the way you treat your people with so much empathy, do that for yourself, and you'll have a formula that helps you to keep going and trumping these challenges that are there in the workplace and in life.
Wow, thank you.
Okay.
Wow,
So mine is
thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
so mine is a bit controversial. I know Susan has got
Yes, we are ready.
yeah. I think when I read this question, I was just like, as Kevin said, I don't know why when we talk about women, it's like we are special. I know we are, and I love us as women. But then I think that's how we've gotten ourselves into this box where everybody is walking on toes, like because you're a woman and this and that. My advice is let's do it like the men do it. They are just people walking these streets and working and doing their thing and making their money, raising their children, all that. And I know there's this whole talk about we need to be equal to the men and everything. I feel like we have to walk the talk as women. And I feel like one thing that I have noticed about women in leadership is that for women in corporate, they think that like ability is the currency, but men know that functionality is the currency in corporate. So I feel like with women, we are chasing to be liked. That's why you don't want to ask for a big salary. That's why you don't want to ask for that leave, because God forbid I do something wrong and they take somebody else for my position. Men don't care. They will ask for exactly what they want when they want it. They will raise issues openly without feeling like I'm a guy. If I say this, I'll be seen like this. And it's a socialization thing, right? It's like you want to be liked because you're a woman. You want to seem nice. And when you're nice as a woman, you're correct. And that's the wrong way to go about it, right? You can't be a leader and box yourself in this whole I'm a woman kind of thing. And I feel like the women card sometimes it is overplayed. That's why I say it's a bit radical. But I feel like we can't keep saying I'm a woman. It's tiring. Guys, come on. If we're saying we want to be equal to the men, and I know we are different naturally because of
Yeah,
different
yeah,
spheres and nuances of
yeah,
life,
yeah,
but in the
yeah.
corporate space there has to be a sort of balance where your woman card has to take a back seat and you have to be functional just like the male species, and that will actually bring us up according to the ladder and how the science in the corporate world works. That's what I think.
Fantastic. Thank you. I love it. And
Yeah,
we love the controversial thoughts because it means we're thinking outside the box. And one of the
yeah,
things you said that I think is so
yeah.
important, and actually to me, it's something that you mentioned as well, Susan, is this idea of self-awareness, right? I think that you can only come to a place of recognizing that you are possibly holding yourself back as a woman if you are self-aware. If this woman card, you've been holding on to it and it's been holding you back. You only come to that realization if you're self-aware. If you're lacking in self-awareness, you're not going to recognize that actually what's standing in your way is you. There's a book that I have, I downloaded in my kind of audio book app. I haven't read it yet, but the book is entitled The Mountain is You, right? The mountain is you. And I was just like, wow, I need to read this book. I'd never even heard of it. I came across it as I was looking for something else. And I thought, this is the kind of book I need to read because I feel that a big portion of the work that needs to be done for us to gain the access we need, for us to achieve the things we want to achieve, and I think this is the same, both male and female, is the work on ourselves, right? And so sometimes, to your point, Milan, this is the work of reminding yourself that I need to ask for what I want. I need to be more vocal. I need to stop worrying about how I'll be perceived. I need to stop thinking about being nice, and I need to just be. And the truth is, our socialization, we have been socialized that way. I mean, I think it's great when you see young people coming up through the ranks, because I think that as parents, we've done maybe a better job, maybe worse in some other ways, but a better job in the sense that
Yeah.
we've not done this thing of the boy is the one doing this and the girl is doing this. I think in a lot of homes, things shifted and both were doing. And so the girls are just as they are taught to have a kind of hunter mentality just as much, which is great because you see that playing up in the workplace. But for me, I think what's critical is know yourself, right? Know what are the ways that you are possibly holding yourself back so that you can step out of the way, so that you can achieve the great things you need to achieve. So love the conversation we're having. Stella, thank you very much for joining us. Stella's comment is 100% progress over perfection. Feedback is indeed important in debunking disabling beliefs with women. So thank you very much for joining us. Eunice earlier had said that she's learning a lot from our panel. So thank you very much. Kelvin, let me come to you and ask you a question. Let's talk about male allyship, right? How can male allies leverage EQ to create a more inclusive workplace and challenge the systemic barriers for women? I think that indeed it is true that, you know, we have a lot to contribute to some of the things that are holding us back, but there are also some barriers that exist. So how can male allies, and I think you talked about this already when you talked about walking the walking the talk, but yeah, how can male allies leverage emotional intelligence to create a more inclusive workplace?
Which I think I alluded a little bit to that. But I think one of the biggest things we need to do as male allies is one, being active and not passive supporters. Because one of the things I've realized is that over time, we get into conversations like this, we talk about it, you know, we clap, we write papers, like I said, but immediately I step out of this conversation, I become a passive supporter. I will not say anything about it. Again, I will not mention it anywhere else, and then I'll wait for Susan, Mucha, and Milan to go and fight for themselves. So I think one of the best ways is for us to become active supporters. And basically, for example, in our society, in the workplaces, just challenge the bias. I mean, like Susan said, if you identify that it's a bias, I mean, classic example, if the people that have been shortlisted, maybe as HR, it's just a shortlist full of men. Something is broken. Just as a male ally, fix it. Say something about it. And it's interesting, which you mentioned about even how we were in our upbringing, even the tasks that you are being given. You realize that that thing comes into the office. Women get assigned what we call office housework. They'll always be given planning events, admin work. And from where I see it, it's a bias basically. And we are not looking at the qualification and the abilities of the women. We're just giving them basically because we were brought up and we were doing more or less the housework. We have just brought and assigned them the office housework. Call it out as a man and ask for tasks to be redistributed fairly based on somebody's ability and capability. So these are some of the few things that as men allies we can do. And even, I mean, we say what, put your money where your mouth is. Basically, just invest in women leadership and development. Because I'm assuming here the men maybe we talk about men that are in position of leadership. In allyship isn't just about attitude; it's about action and resources. Put in some resources in terms of developing these women and ensuring that they have the resources to even develop as women leaders. And maybe finally is it's not maybe currently as things are constituted. Let's be true to ourselves and say there are some rooms that you're going to get into in leadership and find that they are male dominated. As a male ally, speak up in those rooms because women are not there. Speak up in the rooms where women are not present and influence decisions at the top. And not just that networking events. Let's not just have this conversation in events like this. In that boardroom where decisions are being made, as a male ally, are you saying something that is going to, bring fairness in the corporate world or in the political world or in the sphere where you're operating from?
Thank you. Thank you very much. As you were sharing, I was thinking about what Milan said around how, we also need to do our part. And I was thinking to myself that when, as a woman, you find yourself allocated some of those, what did you call them? What you call them? Work housework. Office housework.
Yes.
I think that we also need to learn to advocate for ourselves and advocate for the fact that that's not what you are in that office for, right? I think sometimes we end up, and again, to Milan's point, I think we sometimes are too much in our head. You feel like, oh, but if I say no to this task, I'll be considered that I'm not a team player. So maybe let me just do this task. I'm a team player. You know what I mean? I think sometimes we just need to get out of our head and say no, right? That no, I will not take the minutes. I think Kevin can take the minutes for us for this meeting, right? And not be so afraid of how we'll be perceived. So I really like that that comments, and I think it's for both parties, to do, and we can advocate for ourselves as well. Oh my goodness, I can't believe the time is gone. Oh, time is flying by. Milan, I want to come to you. I want to talk about marketing. So in marketing, understanding consumer behavior is key. How has EQ helped you to connect with diverse audiences and advocate for inclusive messaging?
I think it's a very short answer for me. Just realizing and understanding that it's not about you. By you, I mean me, the marketing manager, or the team, or the agency, or management. It's purely about the consumer. So you have to remove yourself from the equation because there are a lot of preferences in boardrooms and stuff like that where we can't do this because we are not like that. But who's your consumer? In terms of target audience and the consumers that we are trying to reach, even to the levels of developing new products. It can't be because I don't like sugar, I'm not going to develop something with sugar. It's about what is the consumer asking for. So you have to really have an out of body experience where it's like I'm working for the brand, but the brand is for the consumer. So everything that I do is tailored around what are they saying, what do they want, what do they demand. So if I sit in a boardroom and somebody says, I don't think Snapchat works, it shouldn't be a channel. It's like just because you're not on Snapchat doesn't mean that we can't market on Snapchat because there is a whole TA on Snapchat that has nothing to do with you. Whether or not you're the brand manager, you're the director, if you're not on Snapchat, that's not for you. But we have to curate channels and experiences for different consumers without our personal preferences getting in the way. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I think that that then is this idea of diversity in action, right? It's always
Mhm.
asking yourself, in your example, it's the consumer, but as a team leader, it's
Mhm.
my team, right? So I'm having that out of
Mhm.
body experience for the benefit of my team and asking myself, what
Exactly.
is it that my team needs? And
Mhm.
being mindful, because then that way we are less likely to fall susceptible to the biases that exist, because the reality is the biases are there, right? As I'm sitting around the table, I have that bias that, hey, what is Snapchat? Because it's not my area of expertise. It's not something I know anything about.
Mhm.
And I think that
Mhm.
then takes us to the next point that came to my mind as you were talking, Milan. That's why we need
Mhm.
to have more people around the table. So we need to have a Milan in the
Exactly.
room who knows that Snapchat is useful. Because if we only have people who for whom Snapchat is not even a conversation,
A thing.
the
Yeah.
fact that Snapchat is an option doesn't even come to the table because of the people
Exactly.
around the room, right? And
Yeah.
and and
Yeah.
so this is why I always say that when we talk about diversity, and we talk about the importance of diversity, and when we talk about the fact that women should be around the table with
Mm.
men as decisions are made, and equally youth should be around the table as decisions are made, it's not because one is better than the other, it's because they are different,
Mhm.
and their
True.
difference is the strength. It's the perspective I have is different to your perspective, and so we bring both our perspectives to the table, and that's what
Exactly.
makes better decisions for all of us. Guys, our
Mm.
time is flying by, right? So I want us to come to like our final question. I didn't see any questions from the audience. If you do have a question, share it quickly so that I can make sure I come to it and ask my panel. But as we are winding up, I want to ask you a question that I'd like each of you to respond to. And Kevin, will start with you, and then I'll go to you, Milan, and then I'll close off with you, Susan. What one piece of advice would you give to young professionals, especially women who want to lead with emotional intelligence? Because this is where we're coming from. We're talking about EQ, right? So, where
Mm.
do I get started on this EQ journey? We've talked about how emotional intelligence is something that's an effective tool for you to be able to navigate the bias that exists, to be able to champion diversity if you are in leadership. So, where does someone growing in their career get started? So yeah, we'll go with the gentleman first, and then I'll come to the ladies. In the meantime, if you do have your question, I think there's just enough time for you to slot it in to the comments, whether you're joining us from YouTube or from LinkedIn. Over to you.
I think the one piece of advice would be master your emotion. Don't suppress them. I mean, leadership isn't about being tough or emotionless or, just being there. It's about knowing when to listen. It's about knowing when to push, about knowing when to pivot, based on what is really happening about you. So ideally, Musha, your emotions are a tool, not a weakness. As in understanding that your emotions basically are a tool and not a weakness
Mm.
is the one thing that you can be able to do. And you realize that people follow leaders who are authentic. I mean,
Mm.
anybody that it looks robotic, at some point, people just tend to figure it out and realize something is totally wrong here. So once you realize that people love authenticity and people follow authenticity, then you're going to realize that your emotions are not a weakness; they are a tool for you. So use your emotional intelligence to connect, influence, and just create change, even as a woman leader. Yeah, that's what I would.
Mm.
I love it. I always say emotions are data, they're information. And I really like what you said around, recognizing the power of our emotions. Yeah. Milan?
So mine, I'll just say a list of 3 or 4 things that I think young professionals should take away. I feel number one is people pleasing is the fastest killer to the ladder of women leadership. Yeah. So if you are a people pleaser, you have to get rid of that because every single time you will want to break a barrier somewhere or whatever, it always weakens your legs and you can't do it. Two, I think women need to recognize the difference between fear and respect because I feel like there's a blur line there because a lot of people fear their management, their leaders, what people will feel. because it will deem like if I'm having a boundary in the workplace or saying having a stance or being assertive, then it will be seen as disrespectful. So I feel like mastering the art between fear and respect is also an art that people need to hone within the workspace. And the last one is do it afraid. Like there are no women in the table, you're the only woman. You are our advocate, then do it and do it afraid and do it well. Come correct, you know? So that's my advice to a young professional. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love it. And
Yeah.
I agree with you 100%. Do it afraid. And you know,
Yeah.
the funny thing is, you'd be amazed as a young professional that there
Mm.
are women who have been in roles in leadership for many years and they are still doing it afraid because there's always something
Yeah.
new. There's always a new
Exactly.
step that you're taking. So I love that
Mm.
point, right? Do it afraid.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We need to move away, and it goes back to the point that Susan made earlier. We need to move away from
Mm.
this need for perfection and just be happy with
Yeah.
progress. And so I may not
Mm-hmm.
have everything ticked off. I may not know everything. I may not have, all the things aligned, but let me just move anyway.
Yeah.
And I gain
Exactly.
confidence as I move. Thank you very
Mm-hmm.
much for those really great insights. Susan, over to you.
Thanks, Mucha and Kelvin and Milan, because you've really, really covered it. But yeah, I'm like, what else? I think it would be to just reemphasize that emotional intelligence, we are having more and more conversations about it nowadays. And you can get the impression that, okay, now I know what it is and I can do this. But
Mm.
it's a reminder that we need to invest in emotional intelligence. And what does that
Mm.
investment look like? It's time. Emotional intelligence it's a muscle, if I can call it that. And just the same way that you would continuously go to the gym to build a certain
Mm.
muscle, you need to dedicate that time to build your emotional intelligence. So it's things like this. Coming and having these conversations with us is a good use of your time to build up your EQ. Spending some time reading, but also spending some time reflecting, spending some time to know yourself. Because remember, the anchor of it is really a lot of self awareness. And then there's practice. A lot of it is self management, right? So taking the
Mm.
time to say, okay, this week I'm going to be in charge of how I respond because I'm going to take time to internalize and then respond according to what my values are or response to ABCD. And taking that time to practice that, reflect on it, practice again, practice again. And some of this can seem daunting, but there's also help out there. There's EQ coaches. There are people who can be your mentors. There are people who you can learn from, but you need to take the step to invest in it. Because as much as, you can say, okay, I'm a leader, but I'm not an EQ leader, you're not going to be a successful leader if you're not applying your EQ. So take the time to invest now and start your journey towards your emotional intelligence, which will then propel your career as far as you want it to go. That would be my advice.
Wow. Oh my goodness, what amazing insights indeed. And I think that, for our audience, your being here at the EQ Lunch and Learn, or, taking the time to watch this afterwards, is evidence that you are taking a step towards investing in your emotional intelligence. And we're so grateful for the opportunity to support you on your EQ journey. If you don't already do so, make sure you follow us online because we're regularly sharing insights on how you can develop emotional intelligence. As Susan says, it is a muscle, 100%. It's a muscle that needs working on, and you need to work on it consistently. When I'm invited to speak in fora, I always say that please don't call me an EQ expert because I really don't like the word expert, because expert gives some connotation that you suddenly arrived, right? EQ is a journey that we are on, we are all on, and we may be at different levels, but it's a journey we're on. We're continuously growing. So wow, today has been amazing. Susan, Kelvin, Milan, thank you so much. You guys have been phenomenal. Susan, you've been before. To Milan and Kelvin, please note that when you come here once, we often come back and ask for you again. So when we come knocking again, please just open the door and say yes. We'd love to have you back here again. I tell you
Yeah.
every month that we will bring you phenomenal panelists for these sessions. So make sure that you diarize next month, the last Wednesday of the month. We will be back here again to talk about how you can develop your emotional intelligence. So for now, let me say goodbye to my panel. Goodbye, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so
Bye.
much. You have been fantastic. And as we say goodbye to the panel, let me come and say goodbye to you all. This has been our EQ Lunch and Learn, and we are delighted that you joined us today. Diarize next month's EQ Lunch and Learn. Don't forget to join us again as we have yet another conversation about developing greater emotional intelligence. Also, allow me to just give you a sneak peek. We have coming up in the month of May our EQ for Africa conference, Mental Health Edition 3.0. We're so excited to have another conversation about mental health. So visit the EQ for Africa conference website, www.eqforafrica.com, for more information about the conference. We will be supporting you as an entrepreneur, will be supporting you as an employee, will be supporting you as a leader, supporting you as an HR manager to really ensure that you are equipped to navigate this changing world, and ensure that you as an individual and your team have greater mental health. So that's it from us today. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you again next month. Goodbye for now.